I was wiping grease off my hands when I heard the sound, a slow, uneven rattle of an engine on its last breath. That's not unusual in a small town like mine. People drive their cars till they fall apart, but this one, it had a different kind of struggle. The car limped into my garage, a black vintage Chevy, dusty and tired. It came to a rough stop right in front of Bay 2. Before I could step out to greet the driver, the door opened and a man climbed out slowly. He was tall, thin, wearing dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat that covered half his face. "Hey," I called out. "You all right?" He nodded, not saying much. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "Car's been acting up, figured I'd try my luck here." Something about him felt off. Not dangerous, just distant. He kept his head down, avoided my eyes and barely said a word unless he had to. But the strangest part, even with all that effort to hide, something about him felt oddly familiar. I couldn't place it, a gut feeling, like I'd seen him before. But I shook it off. Maybe it was just one of those faces. "Name's Lily," I said, reaching out my hand. "I'll take a look. You can wait inside, there's coffee." He gave a small nod and quietly walked toward the waiting area. I turned back to the car, but my mind couldn't quite turn off that feeling. I've been a mechanic for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I spent most of my days in this very garage, watching my dad work on cars with grease-stained hands and a kind smile. When he passed away, this place became more than just a job, it became my home, my purpose. Living in a small town has its perks and its quiet moments. There's a comfort in knowing everyone by name, and I like the simplicity of it. No rush hour, no endless noise, just the hum of engines, the smell of oil and the steady rhythm of honest work. I take pride in fixing what others might think is beyond repair, and I never cut corners. To me, every car has a story, and every driver deserves respect. Most days, the garage is peaceful. I'm used to familiar faces, folks who come by for a quick tune-up or a friendly chat while I work. Outsiders don't stop here often. When they do, people notice. Rumors start. That's just how small towns are, but I don't let it bother me. I'm not interested in gossip. I care about the work, and the people behind the wheels. Sometimes, that means listening more than talking. Sometimes, it means offering a helping hand without asking too many questions. That's why, when the man in the old Chevy pulled up, my routine shifted. He was unlike anyone I'd seen before. Quiet, careful, almost like he was trying to disappear in plain sight. Still, I focused on the car. The engine's rattle was a problem I could fix. It was what I knew best, and maybe, just maybe, helping this stranger would mean more than just fixing an engine. When the man, who still insisted I call him Jack, sat quietly in the waiting room, I started checking out his car. The old Chevy had seen better days, but what caught my eye was how out of place he seemed behind the wheel. Usually, people who drive cars like that are a little rough around the edges, hands marked by grease or sun, but not this guy. His hands looked soft, almost too clean for someone driving a dusty old car across the country. He didn't say much, just short answers, polite but distant. I tried to make small talk, hoping to get him to relax. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Just passing through," he said, eyes hidden behind those dark sunglasses. He looked down, fiddling with the ring on his finger. There was something about that gesture, a little nervousness maybe, that didn't fit with the quiet confidence he gave off. I wanted to ask more. Who was he? Why was he so careful to stay anonymous? But I didn't. Sometimes, people need to protect themselves, especially if they're strangers in a small town. Still, the way he moved, the way he held himself, felt familiar. Like I'd seen him before, but in a different life, a different story. It teased the edges of my memory, but whenever I tried to pin it down, it slipped away. So I focused on the car. The engine was making a worrying noise, and I needed to find the problem fast. "Jack," I said, trying to lighten the mood, "don't worry, I'll take care of her." He gave me a small grateful smile, the first real expression I'd seen all day. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just any customer. There was more to him, and maybe, just maybe, I was about to learn the story behind those sunglasses. I rolled up my sleeves and opened the hood. The engine was grimy, with signs of wear all over, but nothing I couldn't handle. After a thorough check, I found the main culprit, a cracked radiator leaking coolant, causing the engine to overheat. A few other small problems, too: old belts, worn-out spark plugs. Nothing too crazy, but definitely enough to keep the car off the road until I fixed it. "Looks like you'll be here a couple of days," I told him, wiping sweat from my brow. "I'll have to order a radiator and some parts." "Take your time," he said quietly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. "Here, I'll pay now." I hesitated, surprised by the upfront payment. Most people want an estimate first, or ask if they can pay later. "Thanks," I said, accepting the money. "I appreciate it." He nodded, but didn't say much else. As I got to work, I caught glimpses of him sitting quietly in the waiting room, eyes fixed on his phone. No calls, no texts, just scrolling. Curious, I wanted to ask more about him, but something held me back. There was a sadness there, buried deep beneath that guarded exteriors. Maybe he was running from something, or maybe just tired of being noticed. I didn't pry. Instead, I focused on the work. The car needed me, and I liked it that way. Fixing things made sense. During a break, I peeked over at him again. He looked up, and caught my gaze. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but then it was gone. This man wasn't just hiding from me, he was hiding from the world. And here I was, a mechanic in a tiny town, about to become part of his story, whether I wanted to or not. By the time the parts arrived, Jack had already been in town for a couple of days. Small towns have eyes everywhere, and word travels fast. People started noticing him, not just because he was new, but because there was something about him they couldn't ignore. At the diner, whispers began. "That man looks like a movie star," one woman said to her friend. "Could it be Johnny Depp?" someone else joked. But no one was sure. The sunglasses, the hat, it was like he was trying to disappear, but somehow, he only made himself stand out more. I overheard some of the gossip, but I kept my head down. It wasn't my place to guess who he was. To me, he was just a man, with a broken car. Still, I couldn't help but feel curious. Why would someone like Johnny Depp, or anyone famous, come to this quiet town and hide? Was he running away from something? Or maybe looking for something? One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Green, stopped by the garage. "Honey, I swear, that man reminds me of someone I saw in a movie," she said, eyes wide. "But I can't quite place it." I smiled and shook my head. "I don't know. He's just someone who needed a little help." But inside, I wondered if there was more to the story. The way he moved, the quiet sadness he carried, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was like he was carrying the weight of 1,000 stories no one asked to hear. I pushed the thoughts aside, and focused on finishing the repairs. Because sometimes, you don't need to know the whole story to do the right thing. As the days went by, I found myself talking more with Jack. At first, it was just the usual polite small talk, weather, the car, the best coffee spots in town. But slowly, he started opening up. Not about fame or anything flashy, but about real things. Music, mistakes, and the kind of loneliness that sneaks up on you. One afternoon, while I was tightening a bolt under the hood, he asked me about my life. "You run this place alone?" he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "My dad started this garage. When he passed, I took over. It's just me now." He nodded thoughtfully. "Must be tough." "It is," I said, smiling a little, "but I love it. Fixing things, it makes me feel useful, like I'm keeping a piece of my dad alive." He was silent for a moment, then said, "That's beautiful." For the first time, his voice sounded soft, real. The tough exterior cracked just enough for me to see the man behind the sunglasses. One evening, he pulled out a small worn-out notebook from his bag. "I write sometimes," he admitted. "Songs, stories, things I don't say out loud." I looked at him, surprised. "Sounds like you have a lot to say." He shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe I just need someone to listen." It felt like the world outside stopped for a moment. Two strangers, sharing pieces of themselves in a quiet garage. I didn't ask who he really was. It didn't matter. In that space, he was just Jack, and I was just Lily. That's when I realized something important. Kindness isn't about knowing a person's story, it's about being there for them anyway. Finally, the parts arrived, and I finished fixing the car. I ran it through a few tests, and the engine purred like it had a new life. I called Jack into the garage. "It's ready," I said, smiling. "Your car's good to go." He looked surprised, then relief washed over his face. "Thank you," he said softly. "I haven't had this kind of help in a long time." He reached into his pocket and pulled out more cash than I expected. "For everything," he said. I shook my head. "You don't have to do that. I just did my job." He smiled, a real honest smile this time. "No, you went beyond that. You didn't ask questions. You didn't judge. Most people wouldn't do that." For a moment, I felt a lump in my throat. Here was a stranger, maybe broken in ways I couldn't see, thanking me for simple kindness. He stood up, ready to leave, and paused at the door. "Lily," he said, "you've reminded me there are still good people in this world." And then he was gone, driving off in that old Chevy, leaving a quiet space behind. I watched until the car disappeared down the road, feeling something shift inside me. Maybe kindness was a gift we all needed, no matter who we are. A few days after Jack drove away, life in the garage went back to normal, or so I thought. Then a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. I opened it carefully, expecting maybe a thank you note or a payment. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, and at the bottom was a name I never expected to see: Johnny Depp. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a joke. But the words in the letter were sincere, filled with gratitude and kindness. He thanked me for fixing his car, and more than that, for treating him like a human being, not a celebrity. He wrote about how refreshing it was to be in a place where no one recognized him, no cameras, no flashing lights, just a mechanic who cared. There was also a check enclosed, generous enough to cover the repair costs, and then some. A tip far beyond what any customer had ever given me. I sat back, heart pounding. Could it really be him? I turned on the TV and caught a news segment. There he was, Johnny Depp, talking about a quiet town, a kind mechanic, who reminded him what real people are like. He spoke about the simple moments that help heal the hardest wounds, and how he found peace in unexpected places. I felt a mix of disbelief and warmth. The man I had helped was a star, but he never acted like one. He was just a person who needed kindness. That moment changed something inside me. It wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about the connection between two strangers, a reminder that beneath every mask is someone who just wants to be seen. Word spread fast. In a small town, news like this travels quicker than the wind. Reporters showed up at my garage, cameras rolling, microphones ready. The whole place felt suddenly loud and unfamiliar. Ugh. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the center of attention. To me, I was just doing my job, helping someone in need. The townspeople were proud. They told me how my kindness reflected the heart of our community. Friends and neighbors stopped by, offering congratulations, hugs, and stories about how they too had helped strangers without asking who they were. I smiled and told them, it's not about who they are, it's about treating people with respect and care. The media wanted the story behind the story, how a famous actor ended up in our little town, how I didn't recognize him, how the simple act of fixing a car became something special. But I kept it simple, because sometimes the best stories don't need to be complicated. In the end, the experience reminded me, and everyone around me, that kindness is powerful, and it doesn't need a spotlight to shine. Sitting alone in the quiet of my garage, I thought a lot about what had happened, how a simple broken-down car brought a stranger and a story into my life. It made me realize something important. We often get caught up in names, faces, and what people appear to be, but what really matters is how we treat each other. Johnny Depp was just a man who needed help, like anyone else. And I didn't see a celebrity. I saw someone tired, someone looking for a moment of kindness, without judgment. That's what I gave him. In a world that often feels rushed and shallow, moments like these remind me that being kind is one of the strongest things we can do. Not because we expect anything back, but because it's the right thing to do. I didn't fix that car for fame or recognition. I fixed it because that's who I am. And maybe, in a small way, that's what he needed most, to be seen and helped without questions. Sometimes, the biggest impact comes from the simplest acts: a smile, a helping hand, a little patience. That's the story I want to keep telling. Not about the famous man who drove away, but about the kindness that made a difference, for both of us. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the kindness and humanity in everyday moments. Your support means the world, and helps keep these stories alive. Together, let's spread a little more kindness in the world, one story at a time.